With a single switch flick, darkness engulfed Russia's military operations, and Putin's troops quickly fell into disarray. Total chaos broke out as the Russian army began turning against itself, all due to the precise and strategic actions of the United States. The U.S. managed to disable the one critical element sustaining Putin's frontline forces: Starlink satellite communications. Now, Russia's military is essentially on life support, with soldiers confused and directionless, unsure where to strike, how to defend themselves, or even how to survive the battlefield. The loss of Starlink has created anarchy within the Russian military ranks, especially evident in southern and eastern Ukraine, where Russian commanders are in a state of panic. These units heavily depend on seamless communication to exploit weaknesses in Ukraine's defenses. But the disruption caused by Elon Musk and SpaceX disabling Starlink terminals along a 1,000 kilometers, 1620-mile stretch of the front line has left Russia's forces crippled in their ability to communicate. Without Starlink, they cannot coordinate their FPV drone attacks, and more critically, they can no longer distinguish friend from foe. Commands have stopped coming through, leaving commanders scrambling to find ways to relay orders to their troops. This failure has resulted in incidents of friendly fire along some of the most crucial segments of the front line. The partisan group Atish, operating on behalf of Ukraine, has exposed the current deteriorating conditions among Russian soldiers in Zaporizhia, revealing that command within Russia's 52nd Regiment is effectively paralyzed. Similar chaos is reported in Kubansk, where Russia has already suffered heavy losses despite previously claiming control of the city. According to Euromaidan, Ukraine now controls 90% of Kubansk, and with Staling already retaken from Russian forces by the US, the remainder of the city appears poised for liberation. Meanwhile, the only thing Russia's forces can do is fire blindly, tragically hitting their own troops due to the collapse of communication. When stable communication breaks down on the front line, disorder inevitably follows. Atish confirms that this lack of coordination is already causing significant casualties, not just from enemy fire, but from friendly fire as well. This is not just speculation. In Zaporizhia, Russian soldiers have reportedly started shooting each other after the communications blackout. The Kyiv Post highlights that Russian troops were unaware of their comrades' positions, a danger exacerbated by Russia's shift to a small unit strategy last summer. Instead of large infantry groups backed by armor to break through enemy lines, Russia's forces transitioned to deploying small units of 2 to 5 soldiers, continuously probing for minor gaps in Ukraine's defenses. A tactic described by Viktor Trubub, spokesperson for the Cartesian Operational Strategic Troop Group, as a relentless flow of expendable troops. The situation deteriorated further when Starlink went offline in Zaporizhia. One Russian unit mistakenly fired on another, resulting in the destruction of an entire assault group. When the dust settled, 12 Russian invaders were lost, not to Ukrainian drones, but to fratricide. This tragic outcome highlights how Russia's reliance on civilian technology has backfired. As noted by Atish, once communications disappear, command collapses and troops begin destroying themselves. On the front line, all Russian units dependent on Starlink can no longer securely transmit data, making coordinated attacks impossible. Attempts to communicate now occur over open channels vulnerable to Ukrainian interception, further complicating Russia's operational effectiveness and deepening their crisis. If Russian soldiers aren't accidentally shooting each other, they're falling into Ukrainian ambushes set up along routes that the Russians believed were secure, but which Ukraine has been intercepting through electronic surveillance. This situation is a catastrophe for Russia. Ukrainian electronic warfare expert Serhiy Best-Christov stated on Telegram that the problem isn't just on the front lines. It's a complete disaster, as all troop command structures have collapsed, and assault operations have halted across many areas. He's absolutely right. When Russian troops aren't firing on each other, they're being forced into defensive positions instead of launching attacks, which significantly reduces the pressure on Ukrainian front lines. According to a Euraid press report from February 6, sources within Ukraine's general staff reveal that Russia's loss of access to the so-called gray Starlink terminals, a critical communication tool used between Russian units, has drastically reduced the frequency of their assault. By 4 p.m. on February 5th, Ukraine's general staff recorded only 56 assaults across the entire front line. While 56 might sound like a large number, it is actually far below the norm. On any typical day, Russia launches between 1.5 and twice that number of assaults. With their Starlink communications compromised, Putin's forces face a catch-22. Either they attack blindly, risking tragic incidents like the friendly fire in Zaporizhia, where Russian soldiers killed each other, or they halt assaults altogether, easing the pressure on Ukrainian defenders. There is no winning scenario for Russia here. The situation worsens for Putin when considering Paul Warburg's analysis, which points out that although the incidents of Russian soldiers killing each other and the reduced assaults might appear minor on the surface, the reality is that the loss of Starlink's communication capabilities has closed off has closed off. Warburg explains that without Starlink's connections, Russian drones can no longer carry out the devastating strikes they have throughout the war in Ukraine. Stay tuned for a more detailed explanation of this later. Returning to the topic of Starlink and the U.S. decision, Forbes reports that both Ukraine and Russia have heavily relied on the commercial Starlink service provided by Elon Musk's SpaceX, which offers long-range, secure, and jam-resistant communication channels vital to both sides. However, on February 5th, Musk effectively flipped the switch. Ukraine's defense minister Maho Fedorov confirmed in a statement on that day that Musk and the U.S. had placed the Starlink terminals used by Ukraine on a whitelist, guaranteeing their continued operation and security. Conversely, those terminals that Russia attempted to use were blacklisted, effectively taking them offline unless the U.S. decides otherwise. Fedorov tweeted, "Starlink whitelist is working. Authorized terminals operate normally. We continue verification and are working with SpaceX to ensure rapid terminal registration. This is the first real-time implementation globally." Meanwhile, Russia has been left stranded. The Starlink terminals they are using are not officially registered, meaning they are blacklisted. Whenever the U.S. detects unauthorized use, SpaceX disables the terminals, forcing Russian command units to lose communication and go silent. The impact on Russia has been devastating. Forbes notes that beyond the friendly fire incidents previously mentioned, some Russian units have lost up to 90% of their internet communications. Ultimately, Russia is suffering these consequences largely due to its own actions. The United States and Elon Musk have controversially done little to prevent Russia from utilizing Starlink throughout most of the Ukraine war. However, this stance shifted dramatically after a Russian attack on January 27th in the Kharkiv region of Ukraine, where Russia targeted a passenger train in the Kharkiv region, resulting in the deaths of 5 Ukrainian civilians. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky immediately condemned the attack as an act of terrorism, emphasizing that such a drone strike on a civilian train would be regarded as pure terrorism in any country, with no possible military justification. Musk and the U.S. concurred with this assessment, deciding that Russian President Vladimir Putin had overstepped his boundaries, prompting them to revoke Russia's access to Starlink. Ukraine swiftly expressed its gratitude toward Musk and the U.S. On February 2nd, the BBC reported that Ukrainian Deputy Prime Minister Mikhailo Fedorov praised Musk as a true champion of freedom and a genuine friend of the Ukrainian people for his and Space's reaction to the Hark incident and the discovery that Russian drones were using Starlink connectivity. Musk responded on X, formerly Twitter. Looks like the steps we took to stop the unauthorized use of Starlink by Russia have worked. And added a significant remark. Let us know if more needs to be done, signaling potential further actions. For Russia, this means that the disruption to its frontline forces caused by losing Starlink access is far from temporary. It appears to be a permanent setback. Both Musk and the U.S. are prepared to take additional measures if necessary, intensifying the pressure on Russia. This situation is becoming increasingly desperate for the Kremlin. Before delving deeper into the consequences, it's important to understand why we focus on military developments, explaining how power dynamics shift and how a single action can influence an entire war is our mission. If you're new here, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss upcoming updates. Currently, Russia is scrambling to manage the fallout from losing Starlink. Soon, we will return to discuss another major issue Russia faces due to this loss. Meanwhile, across the full 620-mile stretch of the front line where Starlink access has been cut, Russia's forces have reportedly been reduced to begging for even the most basic radio equipment to maintain communication, as Putin refuses to provide these devices. Russian Telegram channels have launched fundraisers to cover the cost of radios, with one channel, Voyen Rusko-VN, raising approximately 8.5 million rubles, around $110,000, to buy equipment that the Kremlin won't supply. The loss of Starlink is the root cause of these desperate measures. According to the channel, the blocking of Starlink terminals has made troop management nearly impossible on almost all fronts, with soldiers appealing for help to acquire equipment like radio bridges and stations. Voyenary Ruskoy-VN stated in a fundraiser post, "Caps are in hands and the Kremlin isn't filling them," highlighting that the Kremlin expects soldiers to continue marching toward death and even engage in friendly fire, all for the slim chance of gaining territory in Ukraine. Other pro-Kremlin military bloggers acknowledged that the U.S. has effectively struck Russia's Achilles heel by severing its communications. It goes without saying that communication is critical on any front line. When a military's communication system is abruptly taken away, chaos ensues. That is precisely what is unfolding now on the front lines. As reported by the Kyiv Post, Russian commanders are resorting to deploying backup communication channels, but these efforts are failing to restore effective coordination and control. Russia's electronic warfare systems are severely interfering with the radios that soldiers depend on for communication, effectively rendering the $110,000 raised for purchasing additional radios a wasted investment. This disruption has forced commanders to abandon modern digital communication methods and revert to using traditional paper maps, which drastically reduces operational efficiency and slows down decision-making processes that are critical in fast-paced combat situations. Orders that would normally be transmitted instantly over encrypted digital networks are now saved onto memory sticks and physically delivered by couriers, causing significant delays that can span hours or even days. Delays that critically hinder the responsiveness, flexibility, and coordination of military operations on multiple fronts. These communication breakdowns not only compromise the effectiveness of tactical maneuvers, but also increase the risk of miscommunication, friendly fire, and missed opportunities on the battlefield. In essence, Russia is conducting a modern conflict without the benefits of contemporary communication tools, instead relying on outdated, cumbersome methods that not only increase the risks faced by soldiers, but also severely reduce the overall effectiveness and morale of their forces. The loss of access to the Starlink satellite internet service has further exacerbated these issues, significantly worsening coordination on the battlefield and increasing the likelihood of tragic friendly fire incidents due to delayed or inaccurate information. Starlink had been a crucial asset for drone operations, providing live streaming of battlefield video feeds to command centers through platforms like Discord, which allowed commanders to gain real-time situational awareness, identify gaps in Ukrainian defenses, and coordinate targeted assaults with precision and rapid adaptability. Russia managed to smuggle Starlink terminals into its forces through Central Asia and the Persian Gulf starting in 2023, despite official restrictions and attempts to block the technology, highlighting the high strategic value they placed on maintaining this capability amid growing electronic warfare challenge. However, the U.S. decision to cut Russia off from Starlink has effectively removed one of the few remaining real-time intelligence and communication advantages available to Russian forces, forcing reliance on slower, less secure, and less resilient communication systems. Without Starlink, reconnaissance drones lose their ability to relay vital intelligence quickly and effectively, significantly weakening surveillance, targeting capabilities, and the ability to conduct coordinated strikes with accuracy. While towers and relay stations could theoretically be used as alternatives, these are highly vulnerable to attacks and sabotage by Ukrainian forces and resistance groups, making them unreliable and hazardous options that further jeopardize operational security. Moreover, Russia's own aggressive electronic jamming efforts are backfiring by disrupting not only the radios used by their soldiers, but also their own drones and other electronic assets, creating a chaotic electronic warfare environment that seriously hampers coordination and adds yet another layer of difficulty to the already immense challenges faced on the battlefield. This self-inflicted electronic chaos is emblematic of the broader struggle Russia faces in adapting to the demands of modern warfare, where control of the electromagnetic spectrum and secure, reliable communication are as vital as firepower, troop numbers, and the complex interplay between technology. Russia could use fiber optic drones to bypass electronic warfare, but these drones come with significant drawbacks that limit their overall effectiveness on the battlefield. First and foremost, fiber optic drones are extremely costly to produce and deploy, requiring substantial financial and material resources that strain Russia's military budget and logistics. Moreover, the reliance on physical fiber optic cables restricts the drone's mobility, as the cables must be laid out carefully and cannot be easily repositioned in response to rapidly changing combat conditions. This limitation makes it difficult for Russian forces to adapt quickly to the fluid and dynamic nature of modern warfare. Additionally, these fiber optic lines are highly vulnerable to being cut or damaged, whether by enemy action, environmental factors, or accidental interference, which can result in the sudden loss of communication and intelligence links. Warburg underscores these challenges by pointing out Russia's struggles with routing and scaling fiber optic drone networks, highlighting the complex logistics involved in laying and maintaining these networks across active and ever-shifting battlefields. These logistical hurdles prevent Russia from leveraging fiber optic drones as a reliable and scalable communication solution. In contrast, Starlink-powered drones addressed many of these issues by providing a flexible and resilient communication network that was less susceptible to jamming and physical disruption. The satellite-based Starlink system enabled drones to maintain stable, high-bandwidth links without the need for vulnerable physical cables, allowing Russian forces to coordinate more effectively, exploit gaps in Ukrainian defenses, and maintain situational awareness, despite the electronic warfare environment. However, with Starlink services now disabled in the conflict zone, Russia has lost this critical technological edge. The removal of Starlink support has severely hindered Russia's ability to execute coordinated operations, gather real-time intelligence, and maintain command and control across its dispersed and diverse forces. Without Starlink, Russian drones are forced to revert to using fiber optic connections that remain vulnerable to being cut or must rely on radio communications that are highly susceptible to jamming and interception by Ukrainian forces. This dual vulnerability significantly weakens Russia's intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance (ISR) capabilities and undermines battlefield effectiveness. The loss of Starlink not only disrupts communication, but also causes broader operational challenges. Command and control systems become fragmented, leading to confusion among units and increasing the risk of friendly fire incidents, which further degrade combat effectiveness. The disruption slows Russia's already sluggish offensive, which has been characterized as the slowest in over a century for a major power. What were once modest daily advances have now slowed dramatically, reducing the momentum necessary for successful campaigns. Furthermore, this communication setback directly contributes to higher Russian casualties by diminishing situational awareness and command efficiency, thereby strengthening Ukrainian defensive operations and enabling more effective counterattacks. Even before the loss of Starlink, Russia was enduring heavy losses, with estimates exceeding 1.24 million personnel casualties since the invasion began, and daily casualties remaining around 1,000, despite a reduction in the number of assaults. Compounding these problems is Russia's ongoing inability to conduct critical long-range strikes, which further limits its capacity to project power and disrupt Ukrainian operations from a distance. Together, these factors illustrate how the loss of Starlink has amplified the operational difficulties faced by Russian forces, creating a significant setback in their war efforts. Russia's inability to use Starlink for live streaming drone footage has severely impacted its military operations, especially its capacity for responsive long-range drone strikes that depend on real-time video to identify targets. This loss eases pressure on Ukraine's defenses. The U.S. and Elon Musk's decision to cut off Starlink access has led to Russian soldiers inadvertently causing friendly fire or drone interference. Russian forces now rely on paper maps and ineffective crowdfunding for equipment, struggling to exploit weaknesses in Ukraine's defenses. Despite fewer attacks, Russia suffers heavier losses as Ukraine gains a tactical edge, potentially ending Putin's invasion marked by unprecedented troop losses. The Starlink cutoff may be the decisive blow to Russia's war effort. Ukraine continues inflicting devastating damage, detailed in our video. Subscribe for updates. This disruption not only hampers Russia's tactics, but also damages troop morale amid logistical challenges. Relying on outdated communication slows decision-making, while Ukraine leverages advanced technology and international support, widening the operational gap. This technological advantage is key to the conflict's outcome, highlighting the strategic importance of controlling communication networks in modern warfare.